So this is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy, and today's lesson is another special one. Today's lesson is going to be blah, blah, blah versus something we're going to come to know as vivid thinking. Let's talk a little bit about this difference between blah, blah, blah and something we're going to call vivid thinking. Now, I think the best way to describe this, not surprisingly, is with a simple picture. And so what I'd like to focus on for a moment is a very simple little spectrum. It only goes in two directions, and it looks like this. And on one side of the spectrum, we're going to talk about communication ideas and methods that are very good. An example of an organization with whom I have worked that I think is particularly vivid in the way they address really complex ideas. And then later on, we'll talk about one that's at the other end of the spectrum. So let's start with one that's good. A couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to go up to Seattle, Washington, where there is the headquarters of Boeing Aircraft. And I had about a half a day to work with the program managers that are overseeing the development of the new 787 Dreamliner, which is arguably the most complex machine that's ever been made. And so some of these engineers and program managers started to tell me, well, you know, Dan, it's not just the complexity of building it here. This machine is even more complex because if you think about it, then they exposed to me something I hadn't known. The 787, I believe, is being built in 17 different countries by people speaking 12 different languages. So for example, everything that you see here in light blue is being built in the United States. Everything that you see in green is being built in Italy. Everything that you see in red is being built in Japan. Everything that's in yellow is being built in China, and so on. The landing gear are coming from England, the landing gear doors are coming from Canada, the wingtips are coming from South Korea, the flaps and ailerons are coming from Australia, the cargo doors are coming from Sweden, and so on. So the question I had for the folks at Boeing is, wait a minute, how is it possible for someone, let's say, who's sitting over here in Shanghai, who's working on the wing route over here, to be able to communicate with someone in Italy and say, I know exactly how the piece I'm building is going to fit exactly with the piece you're building to within tolerances of, millionths of an inch. And then is going to be able to share that information with someone from Japan when in fact none of these people have a language in common between them. How is that even possible? And that's what the breakthrough was. Why I think this is such a perfect example of good, vivid thinking is because what the folks at Boeing explained to me is the reason they can do this is because every aspect of the design and the development and the maintenance and the construction and the training of this machine is done through pictures. And it's not just that Boeing has come up with a really sophisticated computer-aided design system. I mean, they've had that for decades. What they've actually done is come up with an entire language for communicating about this complex idea through pictures. So depending on where you are sitting in the world, if you have a question, you log into this global network and you look at the picture that tells you exactly how your work is going to fit in with the work of someone else. No words are needed. It completely transcends the language barrier. This is what I mean by pictures. The power of pictures and the power of visual thinking. And the really remarkable thing, what's so amazing about it is that at the end, it actually works. The thing flies. I mean, isn't that incredible? Made by so many people around the world speaking completely different languages, and what is in common? What's in common is what I'm going to refer to as the language of vivid thinking. That's what I mean. So, as I mentioned, that's on the good side of the spectrum. And of course, as anybody who's been through some of my cadet videos knows that if you ever draw something on the good side of the spectrum, you're then obligated to draw something on the bad side of the spectrum. So let's go ahead and draw something where communication does not work. Here is another organization, one that I've had a chance to work with, whom I love tremendously, but does not communicate well. I have had a chance over the years to work on a couple of occasions with the United States Senate and other organizations in Washington, D.C., and I will tell you that the communication that comes out of there is atrocious. And there are real underlying fundamental problematical reasons why that is so. This is a photo of the Senate Finance Committee. So this is a group of incredibly smart, incredibly stressed people. This guy over here, he's very smart. This woman over here, she is very smart. They are constrained by exceptionally difficult challenges ahead of them, further constrained by very limited resources on money and time, and under an enormous amount of pressure. But the problem why communication works so badly in government, two reasons. The first reason is because it is about politics, so more often than not, this guy over here actually does not want this woman over here to have any idea what he's talking about. He often wants to obfuscate what his ideas are so that she doesn't know, and vice versa. But here's the other thing. Even if they are working closely together, and here's problem number two, the result of their work very often tends to look like this. Now let's stop and think about that for a moment. If I'm a concerned member of the electorate, if I'm a citizen and I'm interested in what's going on in the policies that are going to affect me, am I really going to have the time to be able to drill down? Imagine the amount of effort it's going to take me to try to go through all of this information. You know what? In the end, unlike what we saw at Boeing, more often than not, this kind of presentation of information does not work. Because what you end up having is people, wherever they may sit on the political spectrum, becoming so upset because they do not understand. We do not understand what the messages are that people are trying to deliver to us because they are so typically poorly delivered. And the real essence of the challenge is this. I believe that half of what we think about thinking is wrong. We have come to believe that thinking means stringing together in a linear, verbal fashion every fact, every detail, and everything we need to know that takes us from A to B. But let's face it, as we start to think about the complexity of the problems that face us today, these are multidimensional, multi-layered, highly complex, highly fluid issues, regardless of what we're thinking about, whether it is in politics or in business. There is no way that we are going to be able to fully explore them in this way that we think thinking is. So here's the real issue. We have been taught that the proper way to formulate a problem is to write it down, and write it down in great detail. Here is my problem statement. And we've been taught that our solution is to then go ahead and in a linear fashion write out what our solution is going to be, making sure that we have covered every detail. Well, guess what? That simply does not work when it comes to the level of challenges and complexities that we face today. This is a magnificent way of learning. This is a magnificent way of solving problems, but it doesn't work as well as we would like. It is an excellent thinking in the approach of saying, if I can look at a problem and I can find a way to turn that in to a series of written instructions, written directions, that I now understand that problem. Look, just looking at this picture proves that that is impossible. There is no way I'm ever going to be able to turn this problem into something as neat and tidy as a 5-paragraph essay or as any kind of written document by itself. It's going to be the combination of the two. The picture that simplifies what the problem is that I saw, combined with the linear text narrative. That's what I mean by vivid thinking, and that is what we need to get better at. So let me give you an example. The Economist magazine, which I don't know if any of you might read The Economist, but it's one of the smartest publications out there. Really brilliant. But there's also something fundamentally flawed about the way that The Economist presents information. And let me show you. A couple of years ago, The Economist had a cover story on what they called the data deluge, how to handle the incredible amount of data that is coming into us as we try to make political and business decisions. And then they wrote an article, and I'm just going to read it to you. The article was entitled, Show Me New Ways of Visualizing Data. And I think, this article really piqued my interest because it is about data visualization. And I started to read the article, and let me just read it to you, this first paragraph right here. It goes as follows. In 1998, Martin Wattenberg, then a graphic designer at the magazine Smart Money in New York, had a problem. He wanted to depict the daily movements of the stock market, but da 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 da. In the end, the next paragraph says, Mr. Wattenberg's brilliant idea was to adapt an existing technique called to come up with a map of the market. It used the day's closing price to show more than 500 companies arranged by sector. Shades of red or green indicated whether a share had risen or fallen and by how much, etc. And we end up with well over 2,000 words describing a chart. Now, I say, that's interesting, but why not just show me the chart? Why spend 2,000 words describing a picture when you can simply show me the picture? This is what I mean. We are in a mindset that is borderline crazy. We somehow have gotten to the point where we are so convinced that words are the right way to describe an idea that we will even use words to describe a picture, which would literally be 1,000 times more effective if we just showed the picture. I think that the biggest challenge in business today is going to be addressed by us thinking this through. So if we believe that, we have to understand what is the greatest challenge in business today. And I do not think the greatest challenge in business today is about money. I do not think that the greatest challenge we have in business today is about human resources and making sure that we have the right people. I do not think that the greatest challenge we have in business today is making sure that we've got good project plans to address things. These are all serious problems and serious challenges, but they are only contributors to what I believe is the real challenge that we face. It is this: how do we take increasingly complex ideas? The ideas and the problems are becoming increasingly complex. And how do we share these more complex ideas more clearly? How do we make them more clear in less time to more people who also themselves have more access to greater amounts of information than they have ever had in the past? The real problem we have is simply one of being clear. That trumps everything else. How do we make more complexity more clear in less time to more people who have more access to more information, and all of us are being overwhelmed? And this is the real cycle that we have to address, and the answer to it is in clarity, and the answer to clarity is something that will not be addressed by the typical ways that we have learned to approach problems for three very simple reasons. Because when we approach a problem, as intelligent as we may be, and as thoughtful as we may be, and as important as it is to be able to write things out, the written presentation of complex ideas, almost by definition, brings with it three challenges. It becomes very, very complex. The writing does not simplify, it actually tends to make things more complex for many, many neurobiological reasons, some of which we'll talk about. Complexity actually kills our ability to think. When things are too complex, we cannot think. Also, because of this vast amount of information which is in here, which frankly in today's time-pressed business world, few of us are actually going to read, it's actually ripe for misunderstanding. And misunderstanding actually kills our ability to lead. If we do not understand what each other is talking about because it is too verbose, we cannot lead each other and make good decisions. And then the third reason is, of course, it is unfortunate, but it is reality, that if something becomes longer and longer, it does have a tendency, unless it is dynamically written, which most of it is not, to frankly just become boring. And boredom kills our ability to actually care. And after a time, we cease paying attention anymore. So the solution, of course, is we've got to come up with something new. And I think that the something new is what we've been talking about from the beginning: vivid thinking. And I know all of you know what this mnemonic means because I've already been over it in the introductory video, but since this is really what we're going to talk about for the rest of this year, let's go ahead and state one more time, what does it mean? Vivid thinking is a mnemonic which stands for visual. The VI gives us visual. This V gives us verbal. And ID gives us interdependent thinking. So if we put that all together, what do we have? Visual plus verbal interdependent thinking. It's not one or the other, it's both. A better way to show what that means is to show what that means. Vivid thinking means that we must be able to increase our ability to draw out our ideas so that we can make them clear. We also must have the ability to write out our ideas so that we can make sure that they are logical and that there is a linear progression of the idea. Because it's only when we combine both of those, it is only when we combine both of those, do we know for ourselves that we have fully explored our idea, that we have let our mind go through the linear process of logically thinking it through and through the spatial process of spatially making sure that we've accounted for all the pieces and how do they relate to each other. That is what vivid thinking is. To put it bluntly, in the future, when vivid thinking becomes a much more accepted way of approaching ideas, we will recognize that, you know what, I am no longer going to believe the person who can only talk about an idea, that they've actually thought it through. I will not believe them anymore. Nor, frankly, will I believe the person who can only draw their idea, because I will know that there are aspects that they have not thought through. In the future, we will believe people who can both write about their idea, talk about their idea, and draw their idea, because then we will know that they have fully worked through every aspect of it. It's very simple. The equation goes like this. We have trained ourselves for very good reasons to be able to focus on that part of the way we think, our verbal mind. What we need to focus on is reinvigorating, reawakening, of course, our visual mind. My emphasis is going to be on this side of the way we think. But I want you to keep in mind that I'm not saying this is the only way I want us to think. We're already, most of us, really good at that side, so we need to focus on this side in order to be able to do both. I'd like you to pull out your sheet of paper and your pen and just draw along with me as we just kind of write a word box, write the word circle, and write the word triangle. I want you to go ahead and write those things down for a moment. See how that feels? We know how to do that. And now I want you to unleash the other side of your mind. I want you to draw now for a moment the things whose names we just wrote down. I want you to draw some boxes. I want you to see how different that feels from writing this word to go ahead and draw the thing. And I want you to feel how different it is from writing the word circle to drawing some of these things. Go ahead and do that with me. Because what I want you to feel is how different it is. And then one thing is writing down the word triangle. I want you to feel how different it is to do this. We are not activating the same parts of our mind when we do this and when we do this, and yet this is the one that we've been trained to. Well, you and I, all of us that are on the phone, people in Napkin Academy, we're going to fix that. We're going to increase our ability for everybody to do this so that we can make sure that when we do this part, we're really thinking through what it means. Because when we do that, it's going to change the world. I mean it. Think about politics. Think about all of the blah, 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 blah that we hear when we're in politics. And think about the ways that policies are then written. And you know what? It's a document that's almost impossible to read. And yet that's the document by which people are expected to make decisions about where do they think we should go. What would happen, I say, if we got away from this world that tendingly starts to take us into blah, 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 and said, you know what? I can take that same idea and I can draw it out. And I can draw it in such a way that I can see what it is that we're talking about. and I can draw it in such a way that not only can I see what it is that we're talking about, I can see what it is that people are suggesting through their written documents. I can suddenly begin to see it. What a powerful tool this will be for us. That's what we're going to focus on. Here's another example. Let's say that there is a contentious business approach. Let's say that a huge company like Walmart decides that it wants to try to change the way it does business. And lots of articles get written about it. And in this particular case, Walmart was saying that it wanted to become more environmentally sustainable. It's the world's largest private company, and it wants to become more environmentally sustainable. That sounds good, but how do I know what all of this actually means? How do I know what I really believe? And in fact, Walmart is willing to publish all kinds of data that shows, how energy consumption is handled today and how it might be handled in the future. But how can I make this compelling? How can I move it away from data into something that my visual mind can really begin to capture? How can I begin to draw out the simple pictures that say, what story do those points of data actually tell? Instead of getting obsessed by looking at the data, let me go ahead and look at for a while and see if I can't draw some pictures that start to make it clear to me what the data actually mean. And then what would happen if, based on those little sketches, I was able to come up with a larger sketch that says, the impact of all of that data that I saw, all of those spreadsheets and all of those tables, begins to look like this if I map it out into the actual world of Walmart. And then from that simple sketch, I might be able to make a working model, a visual model that shows how does Walmart actually work? How does logistics take place? How much energy consumption is there in terms of trucks and facilities? And how much carbon output is there in terms of all of those facilities? And then from that, I might be able to really break it apart and say what could be truly the impact of looking at each different point of data and seeing how they actually interact and what kind of meaning I have. That is a much better way of being able to make a good story, a good visual story that someone is willing to pay attention to, that will deliver us with real insight, where we can say, I get it. And I want to share with you that we face a challenge. Those of us who might believe that this is an effective way to think, more visually and more verbally, we face a real challenge. It's going to be hard. And the reason is because our educational institutions today, for the most part, do not believe that visual thinking has any place in what we refer to as intelligence. And what I'm showing you on the screen right now is something all of you in the United States would probably recognize it. If you're outside the United States, let me explain it. This is something called the SAT test, the Scholastic Aptitude Test. This is the test that pretty much every student in the United States who wants to go on to enter university or college has to take. Now, what's fascinating about this test is it runs about 3 hours and 45 minutes, and everyone as they're reaching the end of high school takes this test. And this test really only tests for three things. It tests your ability to read critically, to write, and to be able to do math. Those are the only three things that it tests. It tests nothing about our ability to visualize a problem. It tests nothing about our ability to understand multidimensional problem analysis, cause and effect outside the boundaries of exceptionally linear logic. All of the things that became clear when we looked at those pictures in the previous pages, none of them are tested for in our education because traditionally we don't think it's important. So we have to come up with a set of tools because, as we know, eventually what happens, writing is wonderful. Writing is the most incredible technology humanity has ever developed, but writing also is the easiest technology for us to break. And one of the ways that we typically break it is we either say so much or we say something unclearly that it becomes blah, blah, blah. You know where I'm going with this, because what we're going to do with our vivid thinking is we're going to provide ourselves with this set of tools that will allow us to take all of these words and begin to turn them into things that are combinations of words and the pictures that make them even clearer. And I want to give you a really quick overview of how this is going to be structured. The way that all of the remaining lessons for all of you associates are going to go, so literally over the next year, is that we're going to start out by mapping out where we are now and how we got here. Then we're going to map out a way out of the world in which we've gotten ourselves stuck so that we have a place to go where our ideas will be much clearer. We're going to do that in these 3 stages. I'm going to wrap up my formal presentation, and what I want to do is I want to leave you with a problem, a bit of a piece of homework until we meet again. Because what I'd like you to do prior to having my given you any of the tools of vivid thinking is I want you to start imagine how it might work for you. So here's the problem that I want to leave you with. This is a very, very typical problem for anyone who's in business today. This is a quotation. This comes from a gentleman named Chuck Townsend, who is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Condé Nast. Now, if you're not familiar with Condé Nast, they're one of the world's largest publishing companies. Even if you don't know Condé Nast, you certainly know one of the magazines that they produce, whether it's Vogue or Golfing Digest or you name it. So a year ago, Chuck Townsend, the CEO, sent out an email to all of his employees around the world saying that they'd come up with a new strategy to help Condé Nast become more competitive in the new interactive world. And here is what he wrote. In July, we announced a strategic refocus of our company and identified 3 clear priorities to ensure our future growth and success: a consumer-centric business model, a holistic brand management approach, and the establishment of a multi-platform integrated sales and marketing organization. To optimize brand revenue growth, we will shift responsibility for single-site digital sales and marketing to the brand level. Publishers can now fully leverage their offerings across all platforms. That was the email that he sent out to all his employees. You know what the response was company-wide? What? What did he just say? There were a lot of words in there, but what does it mean? A consumer-centric business model, a holistic brand management approach, a multi-platform integrated sales and marketing organization to optimize brand revenue and singles. What? This is what we actually face. This is the enemy of the clarity that we need. I'm sure that Chuck Townsend is a very, very smart man. And I am also sure that there's an incredible amount of really clear and important thinking that is buried somewhere in this paragraph. But I'll tell you what, I don't know how to find it. And I'm not going to take the time to try. And all of a sudden, if I'm an employee of Condé Nast, I'm likely actually to become less sure of what I'm supposed to do rather than more sure. That is the problem. And I'm going to ask you on your own to try to work on it. But before I do, I want to leave you with a tool. And this is something that I call a character map. And what I mean by that is, well, I'll tell you what. Let me tell you a little story so you can see. I want to focus on a book for a moment called The Princess Bride. A book that has absolutely nothing to do with Condé Nast, and it has absolutely nothing to do with business thinking. But it is a book which is a great adventure story that adults and kids love to read. So I introduced this book to my children. And let me show you what's on the very first page of this book. The year that Buttercup was born, the most beautiful woman in the world was a French scullery maid named Annette. Annette worked in Paris for the Duke and Duchess de Guiche and did not escape the Duke's notice, etc. And at that moment, one of my daughters said, "Wait a minute, stop. How many people did you just introduce? There's Buttercup, there's some scullery maid, there's some Duke, there's some Duchess. We haven't even gotten halfway through the first paragraph of what I think is a lovely book, and already we're stuck on who are all these people that we're talking about." So we came up with the idea of doing something called a character map. And this is the tool I want to leave you with. And I'd like you to approach back Chuck Townsend's quote so that you can. What a character map is we begin reading a verbal narrative. And the first time that a character gets mentioned, Buttercup, we say, oh, there's a character named Buttercup. And we go and we draw a quick little picture of who do we think she is. And then the next person was someone named Annette. So now let's draw a little picture of Annette. And what do we know about Annette? Well, Annette was the most beautiful woman in the world. So let's go ahead and make Annette really beautiful. And Annette, and then we say, okay, so she worked in Paris for the Duke and Duchess de Guiche. So we've got a Duke and we've got a duchess, and their name is De Guiche. And so what we do, this is what I mean by a character map. Each time a new character gets introduced, we stop and we create a little picture of who that person is over on the side. And eventually what's going to happen as we read through the whole story is our character map is going to become very much filled out, but eventually we'll begin to see exactly who is who and what is the relationship between each person. And by the time we're done with the book, what will we have? We will have a magnificent visual description of exactly what took place. And as we read, and by the time we get to page 560 and a new name is mentioned, we can go back and look at our map and say, we know everybody in this book. Who's this new person? Are they important? That's what I mean by a character map. So what I'd like you to do until we meet the next time is I'd like you to look at this quote again. Here it is. I've made it a little bit larger. This is the quote from, again, Chuck Townsend from Condé Nast. And what I'd like you to do is take this quote, go ahead and freeze the video once I release it tomorrow so that you can read the quote in whatever detail you want. Go out and do whatever research you think is necessary to figure out who Condé Nast is, and I want you to create a simple little character map, a map that you think describes what the heck it is that this paragraph is actually about.
Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework. Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that, and I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the Dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the Constrained Proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.